What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another Smart Knowledge Wealth Academy podcast, episode number 15. So, today I'm going to talk about proof we are living in a computer simulation. So, please stay tuned. And because if you've enjoyed the last couple of podcasts I've posted, I think you're really going to enjoy the content of this one. So, it's not going to be the narrative that you're expecting from all other narratives you might have heard about that talk about why people believe we're living in a computer simulation. My podcast is going to take a different angle on this. So I think you will find it really interesting because I want to make this is going to be the last of the 3 podcasts I said that I was going to upload to my YouTube channel. So after this, again, please go to the video description and on the YouTube video to see how you can subscribe to the Tao of SK Wealth Academy podcast and be notified when I upload new content, because all the new content in the future, it's not going up on YouTube, it's going to be on iTunes, blueberry.com, and Spotify. So I put the 3 links there as far as how you can keep abreast of all my new content that's going to be posted. And so I think in the future, I might post little short videos just to update people in the event that I do have to change my name when I launch my future online educational, basically educational school that I'm going to do, because it's going to be a complete online educational school with about 20, I think about 20, 22 courses. All the courses haven't been set in stone yet, but most of the content has already been developed. So I'm just in the process of developing all the accompanying audio files for people that want to listen to the content of my courses as they go to work, or as they take the subway to work, or driving to work and whatnot. So there'll be a couple different different ways that you can learn my content, either through reading or listening and whatnot. So all the content's developed. I just have to develop all the audio files. And then once that is ready, I would say for the first 5 or 6 courses, then I'm going to start launching at least, the beta platform for my complete online course. So if I have to change that, obviously I'm going to come back and just make short videos on YouTube so people know how to find me and find my website name, which is not up yet, but it will be obviously up when I officially launch my SK Wealth Academy online. And then just as a update, I wanted to thank all the people that posted comments on my last video, because that really helped me out to know that at least the 100 people that are still listening to my content on YouTube are not all bots. That was really important to me. That will help me make my decision in the future if I can keep my SK Wealth Academy name. So I'm going to research a little further to see exactly how censored it is from Google, from the Google Internet search engine. And I do hope to be able to keep that name in the future, but at least I know it's just not all bots, and that there are real people listening, real people that really enjoy the content and whatnot. And so moving forward, this is the request I'm going to make on this video. If you're listening to this video, because in the past I was really adverse to asking for other people's help, but I realized that I can't do this alone. So because I'm being censored and shadow banned by YouTube and Google, I really do need the support of the community that listens to my content, that appreciates my content. And this is something that I need your help, because we can do this together, but I certainly can't do this alone. So I certainly do appreciate any help that you guys give me, any support that you guys give me, that is not unnoticed by me, that does not go without my deep gratitude and appreciation. Because actually, although people think this is a fairly new development of people just being shadow banned and censored by Google and Twitter and YouTube, it's not been that way for me, because it really started about 4 years ago. It really started about 2014, when my viewership for all my videos really started dropping off from about 10,000 to 50,000 views. And really, at the very least, I would at least get 5,000 to 7,000 views for even the videos that were not watched that much. And then all of a sudden, it started dropping down to just a few thousand consistently, whereas my higher ranking videos would be somewhere in the 30 to 50,000 view range, and then from a few thousand started dropping off to just like 1,000, and then a few hundred, and then just to like 100. So that started happening to me 4 years ago. And what was really interesting was back then, because I had a concurrent blog that I used to write a lot of articles and post content on a very, very frequent basis. And back then, Google would actually allow you to see the exact servers that were accessing your content. So now they don't allow you to do that. They just will tell you, basically where the servers are located. I think it's by city now. It might even just be by country. I'm not really sure because I haven't really looked at any Google Analytics ever since they started really censoring me 4 years ago, because there's just no sense in looking at that data anymore. It doesn't really help me at all. So it was sometime, I don't know if it was like 4 years ago or 7 years ago, they still allowed you to do this, but I remember going online and saying, hey, who's accessing my blog content, the blog I have on smartknowledgeu.com, and I noticed that there were servers from the corporate headquarters at Goldman Sachs, and there are also servers from the Department of U.S. Homeland Security, which I found really interesting because I knew it had to be for official business, because having worked at a Wall Street firm many moons ago, I know that they put up strict firewalls. They don't want you browsing on any other websites outside of the intranet, outside of the corporate intranet. And I know that is the case for government websites especially, and also for if you're browsing from their server, because they're firewall, so you can't access, you wouldn't be able to access like my website at smartknowledgeu.com. So it has to be official executives, and probably pretty high level executives, that were accessing my blog content. So I found that really curious, like why are these guys? It wasn't like some intern or some recent college graduate that was just surfing the web and on my blog, because when I was working for a Wall Street firm, you couldn't go on Facebook, you couldn't go anywhere outside of the corporate intranet. That's how strict the firewalls were. So, around that time, I found it interesting because I was being accessed by, these elite corporations, that's when the censorship really, really started to hit me hard. And also at the time, I found this interesting that someone that claimed to be an ex-CIA guy contacted me and said, hey, I really want to help you out. And I really thought that there was a good possibility that this wasn't like a troll, that it really was this person. But brought me back to that 1986 Ronald Reagan. For those of you that aren't American listening to this, you might not know Ronald Reagan is a former US president in the 1980s. I think in 1986, he said the most 9 terrifying words in the English language are, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help you. Or I'm here from, I don't know if there's I'm just paraphrasing, so I don't know if that's exactly 9 words, but it's something like, I am here from the government and here to help. And so that's all I thought about when this guy said he was here to help me, because I know once CIA, there's no such thing as ex-CIA, always in the CIA, so I never really responded. But I do, believe that I was on the radar of some very high people, because I was also contacted by someone at the World Bank at that time, and I confirmed that that was 100% correct and true. So, it's possible someone from the formerly CIA agent contacted me, but I was not about to open up a dialogue with this person because I don't think they were really there to help me, especially since that's around the time that my business was getting heavily censored. So the interesting thing is too, just this morning I saw that there was an article that George Soros is involved in a lot of the censorship of people like me that are putting out truth content that really help people through his organization Media Matters. Because here's a quote, because it's from an internal leaked document that basically said that Media Matters have access to raw data from Facebook, Twitter, and other social media sites, so they can systemically monitor and analyze this unfiltered data. It says, quote, the memo says, the earlier we can identify a fake news story, the more effectively we can quash it. I guess quash means squash. I've really heard of that word before. With this new technology at our fingertips, researchers monitoring news in real time will be able to identify the origins of a lie with mathematical precision, creating an early warning system for fake news and disinformation. So it's really funny that these guys like George Soros consider my content to be disinformation when it's actually the opposite. It's like their content is disinformation, our content is actually the truth and reality, which also ties into this podcast topic of the fact that most of us are living in a perceived world that is not a reality. So again, the way that we can defeat Facebook, YouTube, Google, George Soros, people like this that are trying to misinform the public is by bonding together. So I really need your help. So one thing you could do to really help me out is, this is going to be my request for this podcast, is to really, if you enjoy this content, to please just send the links as far as how people can subscribe to my podcast at blueberry.com. Again, all the links are listed in the YouTube video description below this video. So just click on, about this video, and you'll see all the links. Send the links for my iTunes podcast, what they call it, like the feed that will list all my podcasts. Because even there, if you don't know, I think there's about 18, 20 podcasts listed. So you can go back and listen to my all podcasts as well. And same thing on blueberry.com. All my podcasts are listed there. And on Spotify as well. So all the links are there. And just send just a message out to your email list, just saying, hey, I've enjoyed some of the content this guy's put up. I think you might find it really interesting. So take a listen, because I think you might enjoy it as well. And that would really help me out, because it would help us defeat the George Soroses and the Googles and the Zuckerbergs of this world and the Eric Schmidts of this world and the Sergey, what's that guy's name at Google? Sergey, I can't remember. It's Eric Schmidt and Sergey something. These people that are trying to shut us up. And because, again, we can do this as a community, but I can't do this alone. And I need your help. And that would be one way to really, really help me out. And the second thing is, I'm not going to ask anyone to comment below as far as how many views are on YouTube this time, because I know that there are actually real people listening. It's not bots now. So if you could just ask a question that you want me to address, and I'll try to answer as many of those questions in subsequent podcasts that I'm going to release in the next couple months. And if there's only 20, I'll probably be able to go through all 20 questions and answer them. So if you had a question that you want me to answer, please comment below in the YouTube video. If you're not listening to this on YouTube, then go to the YouTube video and write a comment below as far as the question you want to answer. And I'll try to answer as many as I can. If there's just, like I said, a group of 20, I'll answer them all in a podcast that I will upload sometime within the next month or two. So let's begin today's podcast. So that's good. Takes care of all the administrative stuff, and let's get into the really interesting content of today's podcast. So what do I mean we are living in a computer simulation? Because many of you may have heard the title and say there's no scientific evidence of that, and there is not. But what I mean when I say there is definitive proof that we are living in a computer simulation, that applies not to all of us, but most of us. So why do I say there is proof? Because I know for a fact, just from talking to people, that most of us believe in paradigms and societal constructs that are not true, like the purpose of academics is education. Therefore, many of us that live inside perceptions of life that represent falsehoods, or AKA that are a simulation of reality. And when I say a computer simulation, it's because our brains are, for all intents and purposes, the computer of the human body, right? Because our brains control our CNS, our central nervous system, which can be divided into the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system, which originate in the spinal cord. But of course, the spinal cord is connected to the brain. So the brain also regulates the parasympathetic system and the sympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic nervous system is basically there to control homeostasis, the body's rest and digest response. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for the thing everyone's heard about, is a fight or flight response. So the sympathetic nervous system controls the body's response during a perceived threat. But the only problem is, if you live in a perceived reality that is not true, there are perceived threats to you that you're not going to react to when you should react to these threats. So what do I mean by the fact that people are living in a computer simulation. Well, as I said, your brain really is like your operating system, right? So I think education is what updates your operating system. Because if you don't update your operating system on a consistent basis, you're not going to understand reality. So what you are going to understand is the simulation that those in power have placed us in. And what do I mean by the simulation? Well, if you believe in certain societal constructs that the objectives of certain societal constructs are certainly not true, like you believe in the purpose of schooling is education, when the purpose of schooling is really social conditioning and really to program obedience and compliance to those in power to become a good worker. That's what the purpose of schooling is, to program an obedient worker and to produce obedient workers, and not really to educate you. Then you are living in a computer simulation, because as again I said, your brain regulates the operating system of your computer. It's the one that controls it. And if it creates this perception that academics is education, that's really a simulation. You're not living in reality. And likewise, even during the 2008 financial crisis, the then U.S. Secretary of Treasury, U.S. Treasury Secretary, Hank Paulson, who was a former CEO of Goldman Sachs, he basically said, we can solve this financial crisis not by actually solving the fundamental problems of the banking and the monetary system, but he said just by changing people's perceptions. He said if we can trick the American public into believing that we're taking steps to stabilize the economic and the financial system in America, he said it will survive, because he said perception is reality. It doesn't matter if we actually fix it, because that quote that they came up with of we're going to bail out these banks, which is socialism for the one percenters, because capitalism means those banks would have failed. So that's what's even ridiculous, because people that argue against socialism, I'm certainly not for socialism. They're fine with socialism for the banks. I'm not saying all the people are, but there are many that really don't even, because they live in a simulation. They just believe all the false perceptions told to them. Oh, America's going to go down in flames if we let these big banks collapse and go bankrupt because they're so greedy and try to rip people up. No, that's capitalism. Let them go bankrupt. So, Hank Paulson said, all we have to do is convince people that we're taking steps to fix the problems, and it will survive, because he said perception is reality. So as long as we can change perception, that's all he did. He wasn't even focused on fixing the problem. So, when the second phase of this 2008 financial crisis hits, that was never fixed. All they did was they took the same situation that existed in 2008, never fixed it. That's why stock markets rebounded. They created this perception that they're fixing it, and they never fixed it. And in fact, they did the exact same things they did that led up to the crisis in 2008, but they repeated it on a greater magnitude and a more exponential scale. So when the second phase hits, it's going to be much worse than it was in 2008, because they're keeping things together with perception, with this computer simulation, and it's all going to go down in a big ball of flames. So this is the reason why I say there's proof we live in a computer simulation, because people live within these societal constructs that they believe are true. They believe in the missions of these societal constructs, whether it's academia, whether it's, the pursuit of your career, and they live within these limited confines when there's a wealth and diversity of choices that the majority of people, I would say probably 99% of society, no matter what country you live in, live within this simulation, this perception that is false, and they don't understand reality, that there's a wealth of choices open to them as far as how to become educated, as far as what your career options are, as far as going into business for yourself, not having to slave away and make someone else rich for your entire life, that you don't have to go work in this cubicle in the sky from age 20 to age 65, that you have a lot more freedom in life. And because people don't realize this, you live in a simulated world. And I'm not saying everyone does. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably part of the very tiny percentage of the population. It's probably not even 1%. It's probably a fraction of 1% that don't live within this computer simulation, that understand reality. You're probably part of it if you're listening to this podcast, but the majority of the world, I believe, lives within this computer simulation. And the interesting thing is that I think that it is really the blame culture that keeps people that are trapped within this computer simulation, this brain enforced false perception of reality, and does not allow the people trapped within this computer simulation to escape, to escape the matrix or however you want to describe it, and then enter into reality and understand there's a wealth of options to reach your limitless human potential. And you don't have to be trapped by people above us, because as long as we don't, because what I mean is, oh yeah, we can blame the so-called elites, the globalists, for this position. But that's why I started this video, because I'm constantly learning. I'm learning that's not good to try to do everything myself. That's why I appeal for your help, and those that are listening to this, I really do hope that you try to help me, because the only way we can defeat this, and the only way we can open up more people's eyes and help them escape the computer simulation, because I think ideally we all would like that, right? Because this is the way we can empower ourselves, is to work as a community, to work to help each other, and not just stay in our individual pods and just say, hey, as long as I'm getting mine, I don't care about anyone else. No, we need to really bond together as a community. We need to realize we need other people's help to really reach our goals. And so when we play the blame game and say, I think it's kind of, we're kind of absconding, is that the word? Or shunning? Maybe shunning is a better word. We're really shunning our own personal responsibility, saying, oh, since these people have so much control over our lives, there's nothing we can do about it. But if we take personal responsibility for the position we are in society, and obviously if we're not part of that group at the very top of the pyramid, ruling over everyone, lording over everyone else, and dictating even the information flow to everyone else, well, we can take responsibility by taking action, right? We can take action together and change that. So it's funny, because even this whole blame game, right, that is something that's deliberately being enforced upon us by those at the top. All this hatred, all this animosity of different groups trying to frame issues in black and white and right versus wrong, and that if you don't agree with me, you're wrong. We're allowing ourselves to be manipulated like pawns in a chess game. But if we took personal responsibility and say, who cares what these people are doing? But we are going to take action to defeat that and come together. That's what we need to do. Carl Sagan, the famous astronomer, once stated, quote, "But it can't be that what feels good is what we should believe, because all sorts of deception lies down that road. It has to be what's true is what we believe, and the only way humans have figured out to find out what's true is science," end quote. So it's really interesting, because Carl Sagan wrote that comment in 1996. That's 23 years ago, and he already identified the extremely high levels of self-deception about truth that existed in society at that time. So I know it feels good to believe that we are becoming smarter when we go to school, and to believe that school is making us better thinkers. But scientific studies have clearly demonstrated that this simply is not true. But as Carl Sagan says, we want to deceive ourselves. We want to believe because our parents are spending a lot of money on school, because we are spending a lot of money on school, we are becoming educated and critical thinkers, when in reality, science has taught us that this is not the truth and not fact. And we merely believe this deceptive lie because it makes us feel good. So I actually discussed dozens of these scientific studies that prove this point within my Smart Knowledge Wealth Academy courses, which I'll launch before this year's out, and that have proven that homeschooled children are far better educated, far better critical thinkers than children that attend brick and mortar classrooms. But again, like I said, it feels good for all of us to believe that the hard work we did in school furthered our critical thinking skills, but the facts show this is not true. And this is why so many people have a hard time believing that schooling is not the equivalent of education. And not only believing that, but they will refuse to even entertain the thought that schooling is not the equivalent of education, which keeps them trapped in this false paradigm, which I call a simulation of reality. And that is why there's proof that many of us are living within a computer simulation. And furthermore, my personal experiences prove this point as well. So when I decided to get my MBA, a decision I fully regret, as I now understand that an MBA has almost zero utility in understanding how real financial markets, how real capital markets work. So I had almost zero utility in my education about those topics that are covered in the Master in Business Administration. Let me tell you a story. When I was applying for entry into MBA curriculums, or curricula, I think that's a proper plural of curriculum, I spent only 2 weeks studying for my GMATs because I was already enrolled in a master program, Master for Public Administration and Public Policy. So I only had that Christmas break to study for the GMATs, as I took the test after Christmas break to enter business school the following year after my first year of graduate school with another master. So I studied for that entrance exam in 14 days, but yet, and I went to business school in the United States, I scored better than 93% to 96% of every single student that was applying to an MBA program that year in the United States. So this is a prime example of the false belief that academic achievement equals intelligence, when clearly it does not. Because how could I score better than 93% to 96% of all students taking that business school entrance exam in the United States of America that studied for that test at least 6 months to a year, when I only studied for 14 days? So obviously the entrance exam was testing for something more than intelligence and more than education. So, Carl Sagan also stated in 1996 that America was being dumbed down, as was, quote, most evident in the slow decay of substantive content in the enormously influential media, the 30-second sound bites, lowest common denominator programming, credulous presentations on pseudoscience and superstition, but especially a kind of celebration of ignorance, end quote. So as iPhone was not even invented until 11 years later after Carl Sagan made that statement, it's amazing because he seems to be describing not just the mindset of America, but the mindset of the entire world in 2018, even though he made that statement in 1996. But again, this is not a matter of Carl Sagan being a visionary in the aspect of how he would see the information age being used by those in power to dumb us down and make us more ignorant and make us celebrate ignorance, as he stated. Although, obviously, when it comes to astronomy and the sciences, he was definitely a visionary. But in this sense, I would say he wasn't a visionary, even though people would marvel at that statement being so accurate 23 years later, because this statement was made from a perspective of Carl Sagan actually living in reality while almost everyone else around him was dwelling in a computer simulation, a false perception of reality. So he was able to understand the degeneration of human civilization away from critical thought and push towards reactors and reductionary emoters, because he understood emoters, I don't know, is that a word? Sorry, just meaning people that emote primitively, that react not in a non-verbal form and just from the base primitive emotions of fear and anger, because he understood the real purpose of schooling, and he could see how schooling was preventing us from becoming educated and critical thinkers. Sagan also spoke about what he saw as an increasing trends towards not celebration of intelligence, not celebration of humanity and community amongst people, and compassion and love, but he spoke of a celebration of ignorance in societies all over the world. And I believe this is because of the growth of narcissism in society that is best exemplified by the millennial selfie culture. Because 20 years ago, people would have mocked people that took selfies everywhere. But today, it's become not only an accepted part of society, but perhaps even scarier, an expected part of society. So I believe it is a good general rule of thumb to never date someone whose IG or Facebook posts are chock full of selfies, because that person is the textbook definition of a narcissist. We live in a simulated education system that is called schooling, whose primary objective is to make us obedient workers and not to educate us. And that perception, that computer simulation, has contributed greatly to the ease by which those in power can get us to fight with one another, can get us to blame one another. Because for our positions in life, if we are unhappy with our positions in life, because today in the media, ignorance is celebrated regularly instead of intellect and wisdom. And the fact that the primary objective of schooling is not education, and that academia is falsely promoted by those in power and falsely conflated with education, is not a conspiracy, it's not a speculation, it's not my opinion. It's a fact that has been heavily documented in memos, meetings, and as I said before, in documents that discuss the originations of the US academic system that was then exported to the rest of the world. This is a subject that I've spent dozens upon dozens upon dozens of hours researching, and I go over all the evidence in the coursework of my upcoming online education academy, SK Wealth Academy. So again, this is fact. It's not a conspiracy. And furthermore, our brains, which serve as our computer operating system, is absolutely responsible for regulating the level of happiness we experience in our lives. But ironically, I believe that a lot of people misunderstand how to achieve happiness because of the simulated worlds of happiness that are created for us, that really don't bring sustainable happiness. Like social media is one of them, but you can go listen to my podcast episode number 13. I've already spent a lot of time discussing that, so I'm not going to discuss it here because it'd just be redundant. But they create a dopamine feedback loop that gives us small doses of superficial happiness, but certainly does not create any sustainable happiness. And it's ironic again, because I have discovered a lot of people desire to remain ignorant of a lot of the topics I discuss in not only this podcast, but even the content of my previous 2 podcasts, because they will say, I don't want to learn how Mark Zuckerberg is trying to manipulate my thoughts and beliefs by altering my Facebook newsfeed. He's like, that information makes me depressed. Just let him do it and I'm better off. Ignorance is bliss. But they avoid learning about the truth. But I'm the exact opposite as far as what I believe. I don't believe ignorance is bliss. I believe ignorance only begets more ignorance and will keep that person trapped in this computer simulation and won't allow them to escape and to realize their true potential in life and realize their mission in life. So if you don't make a conscious effort to learn the truth, that means we stay trapped in this game that they have created for us, and this false perceptions they have created for us, in which they actually deliberately have engineered for us and that we're born into. And they want us to stay within these false perceptions for our entire lives from birth to death without having even one true moment of freedom in our entire lives. And the only way to be free is to learn that a lot of these paradigms, like I said, we're born into, that exist from day one of our lives. Because if you think about millennials, they have never known a time whereby a good portion of their day, or at least of not their day, they're at least observing this behavior, right? Of a good portion of their contemporaries' days are spent on social media and smartphones. And so they don't understand a life before smartphones, a life where intellect and wisdom abounded, and not this type of superficial ignorance that we are happily embedded into as millennials. I'm not a millennial, but I'm just saying that we can see this culture and observe it all around us, even if we actively choose not to partake in it. So not only is it our choice on whether to be free or not, it's also our choice on whether or not to be happy, because happiness, again, is regulated by our computer, our brain, which regulates all of our emotions. And that's why at times I'm really confused by a lot of these self-help gurus that do so well by conducting seminars literally attended. These seminars are literally attended by thousands of people at just a single seminar. And these gurus will tell people what they need to be happy, because they pop off these machine gun like they pop off in machine gun like fashion, these sound bites, these dopamine inducing feel good sound bites, like, you can have your dream house, you can have that yacht, you can have that expensive sports car if only you believe in yourself. That's all that it requires, is just believe in yourself and you will get whatever you want in life. But messages like that, I think, are extremely harmful, because these so-called self-help gurus are subliminally sending a singular message. Think about that message. It's a singular message about happiness that equates material wealth and material abundance with happiness to thousands of people. And I think, like, a lot of these people that attend these seminars don't realize that they're being told what brings them happiness, instead of engaging in that intensely personal journey to find and to really craft their own definition of happiness. So many people in that seminar audience are bound to be more happy, with more free time to spend with family and friends, and less, a lesser level of material wealth than that preached by these self-help gurus. But yet they will never discover that, their personal definition of happiness. They will never discover that this is what brings them true happiness, because of the singular message that's being preached by a lot of self-help gurus that equate material wealth to happiness. And again, if we attend these seminars that preach the wrong message about how to find happiness, and don't preach that no one, because I think these self-help gurus should preach, you should never listen to me about how to find happiness. You need to engage in your own personal journey to find your own definition of happiness and pursue that. That's what they should all be preaching, instead of whipping these crowds into a frenzy about, yes, I can do it. I can have these things that are all these material things that I think I want. But like that Fight Club message is, we spend our lives working to buy shit that we don't need, or something like that. I'm just paraphrasing it. So it basically says that advertising gurus trick us into believing that these are the things that are buying, will bring us happiness. So we spend our entire lives working to try to buy that, only to buy it and realize that we don't have happiness. So really, the key to finding happiness is through introspection, a lot of meditation, a lot of personal time, just thinking about this in quiet moments to find your answers. But since that message would never sell, would never fill seminars with thousands of people, it basically is never given. And if we continue to attend these false worlds about how we can capture happiness, we'll never escape the simulated world of happiness. In fact, let me relay to you this one anecdotal story I remember from business school. And it was during this presentation, and the type of business school I went to, they always put us in these working groups, and we had to do these projects all the time, and it was for like a marketing presentation. And one girl in my group, she had this fear of public speaking. So I remember before, like, that was nothing that never afflicted me. I never really was afraid. I remember even from being in like first grade and doing a school play, I never had that anxiety about going on stage. And so actually, this is so odd, because this memory is just coming back to me, because I remember even back then I had these memories of this girl being like petrified of being in the play. And I remember like talking to her when I was like 7 years old. It's just it's just a play. Who cares? Just go out and have fun. And that was almost the exact same, advice I gave to the girl in business school 20 years later. I said, I don't really think that anxiety is the opposite of happiness, but it is a corollary. People that are anxious tend to be depressed, sometimes can feel sad. And when I saw this person suffering from so much anxiety just for a 2-minute, it was like we had to give like a 10-minute presentation. I think there were like 5 of us, and so each of us had 2 minutes to speak, or perhaps up to like 5 minutes at most. And I said, look, this is I can't recall exactly the time, but okay, let's say it's 5 minutes, right? It was like a 25-minute presentation. Each person gave 5-minute presentations. 5 minutes out of your entire life. Who cares? Even if you completely mess up and get an F, but we were so conditioned to tie like happiness to good grades, and if we get good grades, then we're going to get a good high-paying job. But to me, that again is living in this false computer simulated world of happiness. It's not true. No one should ever suffer from so much anxiety about giving a public presentation that they're really almost paralyzed by this type of fear. And it's just to escaping this matrix, escaping telling you what society tells you must achieve in life at a certain age to be successful, because success, our definition of success, is tied to happiness. And most of us embrace society's level of definition of success, that you must go to good school, you must get good grades, you must get the highest paying job possible. And instead, we need to take this personal journey of our own to discover for ourselves what really brings us true happiness. So a problem I think we have of really finding true sustainable happiness in life, because it's really hard to quantify happiness. So you can look at all these studies that say, oh, people aren't as happy as they have been before. But certainly, you look at the percentages of the population that now are on antidepressive medications, and look at how young they are, from a lot of teenagers that, they say even have problems with focusing, so they give them Adderall. It's like so much of society in the Western world and so-called developed countries are medicated. And I think a big problem with this type of a social media world we live in today, this non-educational world of academia that children attend from age 6 to age 18, if that's when they stop their schooling in high school, or age 20, 21 if they stop it in university. A lot of this problem is that a lot of curiosity and wonder are killed through this process, and I believe we need a great sense of curiosity and wonder to be happy, because curiosity means you will always constantly be learning, you'll always constantly be exploring, you'll always constantly be looking for your mission in life, you'll be looking for those things that bring you joy. Because my whole mission in creating a comprehensive online academy is to educate. So as odd as this sounds, even with an undergraduate degree in neurobiology from an Ivy League university, even with an MBA and a Master in Public Policy, my academic career actually left me feeling highly uneducated, like I was still a prisoner in Plato's cave, and as if I was made to stare at a cave wall my entire academic career without being imparted any real critical thinking skills. So I don't see this as a fault of my teachers, but I see it as the fault of the system, because the system isn't geared towards producing and increasing the level of wonder and curiosity. It's actually geared towards dulling that. So after all those degrees, after that long journey of academia, during which I felt nearly all my true education was the result of my own self-education, my pursuit of knowledge outside of the academic system. That is where I really feel like I cut my teeth as far as my critical thinking skills were concerned. It's actually where I actually learned everything that I understood about the truth of financial markets was self-taught, and not a result of anything I learned in my master program in business administration, which is, as crazy as that sounds, it's 100% true. So if you think about it, even nationalism, which is highly encouraged, almost all of us will fall victim to it at some point in our lives, because those, again, in power at the very wealthiest percentages of that wealth pyramid at the very top will encourage nationalism, because they know nationalism also serves the same end goal of having society celebrate ignorance. And what I mean by that is that nationalism really is a form of narcissism that prevents critical thought, because nationalism is based upon the presumption, often without any scientific evidence, that whatever your country's narrative is better than any other country's narrative. So it's a blindly held belief and perspective often very false at times, that prevents one from becoming educated, because it encourages all of us to not listen to any other perspective other than the one that my country knows best and my country is number one. So in fact, if you look at every person in history that is universally viewed as a creative genius, every single one of them shunned nationalism because they understood that such a narrow perspective on life would confine and limit their creative potential and not allow them to fulfill their best potential as a human being. For example, I was reading a book a few months ago that explained that was exposure to different ideas that are introduced in different cultures that spurred the genius breakthroughs of people like Einstein, who left Germany and then moved to Italy and then left Italy and then lived in Switzerland. And likewise, Picasso, who was born in Spain, left Spain and moved to France. And the great filmmaker Charlie Chaplin left England, he moved to the United States, and then his politics unfortunately caused the US government to kick him out of the US, or actually ban him. I think Charlie Chaplin left the United States, but they banned him from returning. So then he moved from the US to Switzerland. And ironically though, this is the irony of the whole event, is that many of us don't know, like many Americans will know that story of Charlie Chaplin, because the US government tried to basically slander and smear his name as a communist. That's why they said they kicked him out of the United States. But if you look at the film, if you actually watch the film, which I have, that got him banned from the US, it was his film, The Great Dictator, which I think includes one of the greatest anti-war speeches in film history. So that film actually parodied Adolf Hitler. So why would you think a film that he would get banned for a film that presented Adolf Hitler as a terrible fascist and ended with an anti-war speech that would get him kicked out and banned from ever returning to the United States? And this is why, because Charlie Chaplin spoke truth. He spoke out against the American military-industrial complex that makes billions and billions and billions of dollars from war as war profiteering, and they knew that film would hurt their ability to make billions of dollars of profit, and that is the real reason that he was kicked out. Because you can even just find, if you don't want to watch the whole film, which I recommend is a great film, then you can just find, I think like it's titled under The Greatest Speech Ever Told or something like that. You can find his speech that got him banned from the US. And what he's doing in that speech, he's pleading for more humanity. He's pleading for more love. He's pleading for more diplomacy as a result of conflicts between two nations rather than war. And this is just, to me, that's ridiculous that these ideas that promote love over war would get someone banned from returning to a country. And that brings me to my next point, which is living a life of truth, as Chaplin did by speaking out against the multi-billion, that's probably like a multi-trillion-dollar war machine by now. And when you speak truth, I think at some point it's inevitable that this will bring struggle and hardship into your life. So this is the reason most people choose to live their entire lives within a computer simulation, because living a life of truth presents many more obstacles and challenges that people just don't want. But I think this was not the case hundreds of years ago. It's because we have become so soft today. And especially, this is a topic for another day, but I see a lot of men that really are very feminine, are not very masculine at all today. And that's why I believe like martial arts, I believe like all boys should be enrolled, not all boys, but even all girls should be enrolled in martial arts, because even if they quit, if they don't like it, I don't think any parent should ever force their kid to do something they don't want to do. But what martial arts will do will impart discipline into their lives that can be a lifelong lesson that can improve everyone's lives, because you have to be extremely disciplined when you train in martial arts. And I remember, again, I can't remember if I told this story, but I remember right the first year out of university, I was hanging out with my friend Craig Cerritos. If anyone knows Craig Cerritos, who grew up in, I want to say, Maryland, because I've lost touch with him since university. Would love to get back in touch with him. No, Rhode Island. He's from Rhode Island, because I remember now, because he also had a sister that also attended the University of Pennsylvania at the time I was enrolled there, and we were hanging out Friday night, and it was like 9:30. He said, "Yo, I gotta bounce because I have silat classes in the morning." And silat is an Indonesian Malaysian art form that, thanks to Iko Uwais from The Raid and The Raid 2 films, that he introduced Pensat Silat to the rest of the world. But back then, nobody knew what Silat was, including myself, so I had to ask Craig. And this is the type of discipline he had as a 20-year-old. He was going to wake up at 6:30 in the morning on a Saturday morning, when most 20-year-olds are just out partying every Friday night. So this is a type of discipline martial arts will give you. Because even then, I didn't have that type of discipline that my friend Craig had. And again, man, Craig was one of the greatest people I've met while I was at university. I'm really sorry I lost touch with him. If anyone knows him, tell him to give him a shout out to me. Tell him to find me on this podcast, and then look up how he can get in touch with me, because I'd love to get back in touch with him. But back to the reason most people choose to live their entire lives within the false reality of a computer simulation, because like I said, living a life of truth presents many more obstacles and challenges in life, but it's also because I believe we are a lot softer, and deliberately planned being a lot softer, because technology has been used to overwhelm our lives, and really there's a lot of us that don't introduce struggle into our lives when we could. I think voluntary struggle is necessary. Do something that's hard. That's why I say, like, do martial arts, take up jujitsu, take up yoga. Yoga is extremely challenging to me. And so you can do a lot of activities that introduce struggle that's going to make you someone that doesn't shy away from obstacles and struggles. Because I think there's a tendency among humanity today, among society, to want to shy away from obstacles and challenges. I really believe life was not like that for most men and women like 20 years ago. I don't believe life. I believe people were more willing to take on challenges and obstacles, and there's been a deliberate softening of society so people will shy away. But I view living a life of truth and honor like riding a roller coaster. What are the most fun parts of riding a roller coaster? The flat parts with almost no speed, because that is a part of the roller coaster which describes life for those that stay in their lanes and obey those in power, go to school, become dumbed down in school, and then learn how to become a good worker in school, and then go work for the corporate globalists for most of their lives until they retire. And then the only time they really have freedom in their lives are when they retire at age 60 or 65 until death. And that's ridiculous to only have freedom for that small portion of your lives, when we should have freedom for our entire lives. So the fun parts of the roller coaster to me are the big hills, the very obstacles, when the roller coaster is going so slow as it tries to overcome that hill. But then once it overcomes and gets over that peak and that apex, then the roller coaster becomes fast and furious and really fun on the downside of the giant hill. And that is what makes life worth living to me, the wonder and excitement of the hilly parts of the roller coaster. And this is what the reality of life, living life outside of the computer simulation looks like. Yeah, there's going to be bumps along the road. There's going to be these huge hills to overcome, but it's going to be fun. It's going to require a lot of effort, which makes the reward even more rewarding. And it's going to be one full of wonder and excitement, and not just this monotonic level of equilibrium throughout your life, which a lot of people seek, but I don't really understand why. So most people want the boring flat part and don't want to deal with the obstacles that people like Chaplin, Einstein, Picasso, and Da Vinci actively saw. And I'm not saying that you need to seek out huge obstacles to become you don't need to pursue being a creative genius like one of these guys, even though I think there is a creative genius that resides in all of us. I really 100% believe that. But I believe because most of us choose to live within this computer simulation, that we never even explore the potential, our creative potential, because we don't give any attention to the creative potential side of us. So not only do we not explore it, of course, if we don't explore it, we can't fulfill it. So most of us don't come close to fulfilling 100% of our creative potential. We might only dive into the very shallow end of the pool of our creative potential and then fulfill maybe 10 to 20% of it, whereas really a fulfilling life requires that we explore and fulfill 90 to 100% of our creative potential. So for those of you that are generally interested in this topic, I wrote a whole literary fiction novel. I don't know, that's kind of redundant because you can't write half a literary fiction novel. So I wrote a literary fiction novel about this subject called The Staggering Depths of Blissfulness, and it was about a Southeast Asian immigrant's journey to America and all the obstacles he had to encounter living in a completely foreign culture and nation to realize a rich, contextual, and blissful life. So in my novel, my protagonist learns to see beauty in simple daily life events within cities that are racked with poverty and desperation. And it is these events that teaches him how to be happy again, living life in a completely foreign context. So again, the title of my novel is The Staggering Depths of Blissfulness because my protagonist has to endure staggering depths of isolation and suffering in order to reach the elevated levels of bliss in his life. And you can find my novel at lulu.com if you wish to read it. You can also order from amazon.com, but again, I always will promote the small business over the behemoth, so I encourage you to use lulu.com if you want to read my novel and not amazon.com. And I'll just give you a very quick excerpt from my novel because some of you may want to know what the tone of it is if you're thinking of buying it before you actually purchase it. So here is an excerpt so you can get an idea of the tone of my novel. When Umberto was still alive, he had taught me to see the faces of faceless people who dwell in the margins and to appreciate them, to recognize light even in places of darkness. If Umberto had taught me nothing else but this one lesson, my view of life would have been tremendously and positively altered forever. But he chose to teach me so much more. One day, on a hot summer afternoon in Belize, Umberto taught me how angels, by nature of their light-footedness, would float, not walk across the street. Almost immediately, I noted the heavy feet of girls that were mere mortals, and I wondered how I had never noticed before this curious but sublime distinction. When Umberto taught me the difference between seeing and merely opening my eyes, my new visual acuity ushered in a simplicity of life that brought me inexplicable joy. Okay, so that's just one paragraph from my novel in which I explore the same topics as the topic of this podcast. So in every podcast, before I told you I'd throw in a financial tip somewhere during the course of the podcast. I think I forgot to do so in my podcast about social media, but here's the brief tip for this podcast. For those of you not interested in this topic at all, but much more curious about the topic I'm speaking about right now, just bear with me for just a few minutes. This is only going to be a couple minutes, and then I will return to the topic at hand. So today's August 25th. I'm going to speak of the great opportunity I see in gold and silver at this time. Again, most people judging by near historic low sentiment surrounding gold and silver at this time, meaning the negative environment surrounding gold and silver. Most people see little to no opportunity and still think gold's going to head below $1,000 an ounce, and silver is going to continue heading down towards the previous low of like $9 an ounce that it hit during the financial crisis back in 2008. But this to me, in my opinion, because no one can predict the future, but this is an opinion that I believe is based in a perception of falsehood and not reality. And to explain this, let me just draw a quick analogy because I love using analogies. So just last week, on last Sunday and Monday, there were nearly 70 earthquakes of magnitude 4.5 or higher. As you know, I think, what is the top magnitude on the Richter scale? 9, I believe? Does it go up to 9 or 10? Anyway, 4.5 is quite significant. So it hit an area of the world, region of the world called the Ring of Fire. That is where tectonic plates and the Earth's crust meet. So there's a lot of shifting and therefore a lot of land within this region called the Ring of Fire. There are a lot of earthquakes, but 70 within 48 hours of magnitude 4.5 or higher, that is an enormous amount, a significant amount of earthquakes just in a 48-hour period. So, and within that 48-hour hour period. They're devastating earthquakes of 6.3 magnitude in Indonesia. Lombok, I believe is how you pronounce that particular island in the archipelago of Indonesia. And there was a 7.3 magnitude earthquake in Caracas, Venezuela, that marked the biggest earthquake in that region in more than 100 years. And in addition, there was an absolutely monstrous 8.2 earthquake that struck near Fiji, but that didn't make the news during those 48 hours because it didn't really cause any damage because the earthquake happened at great depth. So, in the Earth's crust. So, in addition to these earthquakes, so just in this past year, there was a massive 7.2 Mexico City earthquake, 7.2 magnitude Mexico City earthquake, and then also recent massive volcanic eruptions in Hawaii that all Americans are aware, and in Honduras, I believe, killed 70 or 80 people, killed a massive amount of people. So these volcanic eruptions may or may not be related to shifting tectonic plates in the Ring of Fire as well. I'm not a seismologist. I didn't really look into the connections of those volcanic eruptions, but they're still disastrous events. And so one area so far in the Ring of Fire that's been spared a massive earthquake has been California. So I would say common sense would tell anyone living near a fault line in California to, at a minimum, prepare an earthquake kit with lots of water stored at home, lots of batteries and flashlights, at least a month's supply of canned and non-perishable food, which you can buy for just a few $100s, and perhaps a generator. And but how many people that live along fault lines in California actually have this earthquake prep kit, even though all the signs are there that, well, no one really knows, again, because no one can predict the science of earthquakes. So no one knows if all this activity means a massive earthquake will hit California, in imminent months. But since this earthquake activity in the Ring of Fire is unprecedented, and California sits on this famed Ring of Fire, it would make at least sense to be prepared for a big earthquake if you live in California near a fault line sometime between now and March 2019 as a possibility. So I feel the same way about what all collapsing emerging market currencies are signaling for developed world currencies. So this includes collapses in the Turkish lira, Brazilian real, Mexican peso, Argentine peso, Indian rupee, Chinese yuan, Venezuelan bolivar, and there has been leakage of extended weakness in these emerging market currencies to the currencies of developed nations like the Canadian loonie and the Australian dollar. But so far, everyone is ignoring the very significant earthquakes manifesting in dozens of global emerging market currencies as being incapable of reaching the shores of the US dollar, Japanese yen, and British pound. So I don't know why people are ignoring these signs, because these signs are pointing to troubles ahead and significant troubles for the US dollar, Japanese yen, and British pound, which means people should be looking towards the wealth preservation properties of physical gold and physical silver. Yet, as we stand on August 25th with spot gold and spot silver prices reaching lows of near $1,260 an ounce for gold and $14.30 an ounce for silver just a few days ago, it's near inconceivable to me, with all the financial earthquakes in the global currency markets clearly visible to anyone that dwells in the real world versus the computer simulated world of mainstream news. It's inconceivable to me why people are not gobbling up physical gold and physical silver at these prices. Remember these prices: $1,160 per ounce and for gold, and $14.30 an ounce for silver. Because I'll stake my reputation right now that these price points will be looked back in retrospect 6 to 12 months from now as prices that were unbelievably low, given the types of financial shocks that are going to manifest in the next 6 to 12 months. So that's it. I told you it's going to be short and sweet. Now back to the topic of our lives, or many of us living our lives within a computer simulation. And that is actually a choice as well. So it's not an involuntary choice, it's a voluntary choice for those of us that choose to live our lives within a computer simulation. So not only is what the majority of us believe about academics completely wrong, as the purpose is to train us to be an obedient worker for someone else and to slave away for our entire lives to make money for someone else that works a fraction as hard as the hundreds or thousands of employees that make that person rich. Jeff Bezos, he of the 140 to 150 billion, not million, $billion net worth, he employs thousands of underpaid, overworked, undercompensated workers at Amazon.com. So he's a prime example of an extremely wealthy person that is furthering his wealth off the back of an academic system that's trained people to become obedient workers, not only become obedient workers, but to accept being exploited. And I know a lot of workers at Amazon have demonstrated, so they understand they're being exploited, but the problem is that the computer simulation extends far beyond just academia, because it's our false beliefs. We actually integrate, as human beings, we integrate our false beliefs that result of voluntarily living within a computer simulation that becomes part of our identity. And that is why many of us become virtual reality representations of the best potential representations of ourselves. So we voluntarily reduce ourselves to prisoners in Plato's cave. If you don't know what Plato's cave is, that's a story everyone should know about, every intellectual should know about and understand, so go look it up, Plato's cave. But we voluntarily reduce ourselves to become prisoners in Plato's cave as a result of our acceptance of these false constructs, like academics is the equivalent of education. So we fail to seek out real education. And then when it comes to life after academia, if we were focused on education, we would all realize there is no life after education, because education is a lifelong construct. So there's no separation between education and life after education. Education is something all of us should be pursuing from birth to death. So if that's the case, why are 99% of us so relieved when school is out and summer vacation is here, or so joyous when we graduate from university because we say, oh, this is the last course I'll ever take in my life? And this is a reaction of 99% of us towards school, and it's a sign something is severely and deliberately wrong with school and lacking with school. And I'll tell you what it is. The thing that's lacking from school is education, because if education were present in academia in large quantities, I'm not saying it's 100% missing, I'm just saying it's lacking, but it's severely lacking. It's like being severely deficient in vitamin C. You're not going to have the energy you need to complete your daily tasks. So when you're severely lacking in education and academics, the reaction in school is going to be in line with that severe education deficiency. It's going to be joyous. So, but if education were present in academics in large quantities, all of us would not be able to wait to use all of our free time we have in summer vacation to apply our education in real lives to make our lives more fulfilling and more fun. And education doesn't just have to be about sciences. If, for example, if we were a music major, we wouldn't be able to wait for a summer vacation to not have to wake up and go to school, so we could apply what we learned in songwriting classes to write new songs. And by the way, there's a ton of mathematics actually embedded into music, which most musicians understand, but most mathematicians don't understand, because those in power strip the science out of mathematics today. So if science was still a strong component of how mathematics was taught, today, every single math major would fully understand that there's a ton of mathematics embedded into not only music, but art as well. So if we live within a belief system in which we believe that the best way to become educated is in a brick and mortar classroom, and that the best way to earn a living is then to go work for someone else, then clearly we are living within a confined spectrum of life, and we may live our entire lives within these confines, just like Jim Carrey from that movie, The Truman Show. Again, I would recommend that movie if you haven't seen it. It's kind of an old school movie back in the day called The Truman Show. So if we live our entire lives within these confines, when the most rewarding aspects of life definitely exist outside of these confines, how rewarding can our lives be? How else can you explain life than other than being a simulated world devoid of real choices if we're living within these confines? And the reason I can be so confident in making these statements is because if you find yourself in the process of listening to this podcast, think about things that I'm saying about the falsehoods of academics versus the reality of education for the first time in your life, or you've heard something within this podcast that has prompted you to think about education in an entirely different light than before, then this means that you are living within that computer simulation of education prior to listening to this podcast. And if you have never before considered working for yourself or starting your own business as a real possibility of earning a living before listening to this podcast, then again, you are living under the computer simulation choices for career options as well. And you shouldn't feel bad if any of these situations apply to you, because I think we all have gone through that. I mean, when I graduated from university, I never once thought about starting my own business, not one time, because I was living within that computer simulation. I didn't realize that the most rewarding options were outside of that computer simulation of career options. And for those of you that think now is a terrible time to start your own business, think again, because economic recessions are wonderful times to start new businesses. You just have to think differently than the rest of most people, because most people want security, but life is not about security. There are people, plenty of people today, due to economic recession, that are unhappy with the conditions they see around them, and they want new solutions. Therefore, if you can identify a problem that people have with current services that are delivered in today's economy, and there are certainly multiple problems people have with current services today, and you can deliver a better solution, then during recessions, it's the optimal time to deliver that solution, because people are actively seeking change. Whereas during economic booms, people normally do not seek change because they are already comfortable within the operating system they are currently using. But during recessions, people are looking for new operating systems, meaning new services to better fulfill the type of service that people are seeking out. So opportunities still abound during recession for those that seek them out. And secondly, people don't even have to realize that they want a better solution for a new business to start and thrive during economic recession, because all you really need to do is identify that service or product that people have a high level of disenchantment with during economic recession, like banking being for one, because they feed to death. They feed to death for everything. Even when I've been traveling overseas, I've had banks charge me $5 for checking my balance. That's ridiculous. ATM machine, because I didn't know, and they charged me $5 for checking my balance. Banking is something that people are just disgusted with these days, and they want better services. So if you offer a better bank, and even though people that have been following me for a long time know that I've called out the criminality and immorality of a lot of the banking industry, it's not because the banking industry is immoral. That's not true. It's because the people running the banking industry today are sociopaths and immoral. But banking can be a very moral industry. So if you offer a better bank, then you'll gain a lot of new clients and loyalty for decades. But I'm going to tell you right now that because you're going to go against, you're going to be like Dorothy and the Lion and the Tin Man drawing back the green curtain in the Wizard of Oz and revealing that wizard to be this little cowardly man, that a lot of bankers are not going to appreciate if you try to start a new honest bank, because you're going to basically disable their ability to make money with zero effort. So it's going to be a challenge and it's going to be difficult, but in the end, it'll be extremely rewarding. So if you provide a better solution, people will flock to you, even whether they realize they want that service or not, because you will force them to realize that you are providing the service that they have been waiting for their entire lives. So this is why I am launching SK Wealth Academy during this time of economic research, because I know from my own personal research I've done that an overwhelming amount of millennials, as well as non-millennials, as well as adults, even pre-millennials, feel as though school is not providing the right skills for them to survive in today's economy. And for those that are out of school, they felt that school did not provide them with the right skills to survive in today's economy. So they still need those skills, and that is what I will be providing with SK Wealth Academy. And finally, to conclude this podcast, many people have asked me, you've openly talked about financial hardships you've encountered because of your pursuit of truth, whereas you spoke about how you could have been having this easy financial life right now if you had remained working with the Wall Street bank you had worked with instead of quitting years ago for reasons of ethics and integrity. So how do you combine honor and integrity with making a good living? Or are these two qualities in direct opposition with one another? My answer is definitely not. They are definitely not in opposition to one another. You can pursue a business pursuit that is deeply entrenched in honor and integrity and still make a good living. That is not synonymous with having to be poor or having to struggle, because I was well on my way to making a better living than even the one I had during my limited time I spent with a Wall Street bank, until YouTube shut down my channel and Google censored and shadow banned me because of my willingness to speak truth about the rampant systemic criminality that exists in the financial industry today. So how did I build my business up to this level before Google brought it down? It was simply just by staying true to myself, because people can smell fakeness a mile away, just like dogs can smell fear. I remember one of my friends had a 60-kilogram Rottweiler that outweighed one of our friends, and every time she would have people over, the Rottweiler would only bother this one friend of ours because he was terrified of this Rottweiler, while the rest of us saw this Rottweiler, even though it was a massive and muscular dog, we weren't afraid of it. And it was like totally friendly with us. I would go over to and pet it, and it would only follow around this one friend because that Rottweiler simply messed with this friend of ours because he could sense fear all over this friend. So if you try to be someone you're not, no matter how hard you work, you'll be destined to fail, because people will sniff out your greed or your fake sense of humanity. However, if you're sincere about your objectives, then people will flock to you, even when you're struggling, and people will lift you up. So while you may encounter more obstacles than in the corporate world, if you pursue a business that has as its mantra your pursuit of truth, you will also be supported to a far greater deal than those pursuing money for the sake of just pursuing money. So eventually, though the path may take more twists and turns than you desire, your path of seeking out truth in your business, I 100% sincerely believe that you will eventually succeed financially. So my number one message when pursuing truth is not to be discouraged with the obstacles you will face with those different twists and turns that may present more challenges than if you were working in the corporate world and getting a steady paycheck from someone else. My number one message has to be persistence. Just persist through these times, and everyone goes through times of darkness, and this darkness will turn into times of light. But also remember to build a strong community around you, because these are the people that will lift you up during those times of darkness. Don't pursue your business of truth alone and by yourself, because I had that problem when I was younger. I would always pursue everything myself, try to do everything myself, and never accept help from others. So you have to learn how to accept help from others who will reach out and extend that help towards you. And secondly, the reward from impacting other people's lives is tremendous and worth much more than a high salary can buy. Because I remember after I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, I sought out a job in which I could really impact people's lives. So I took a job with a healthcare company that operated in the poorest and highest crime neighborhoods in Philly. And I took a salary that was only about 30 to 50% of what most of my peers took that graduated from my university. So I knew my reward. I was not seeking monetary reward. Otherwise, I just would have worked for the biggest corporation that offered me the most amount of money. But this is what I gained so much more from that job than any other corporate job I could have taken straight out of university, because I remember tons of people from that job to this day. I remember them that truly impacted my life. And I'm not going to mention their last names because I haven't spoken to them. I don't know if they want their names mentioned on my podcast, so I'm just going to mention them by the first name. But just off the top of my head, I can think of Ingrid, Monica, Janet, Ron, Kim, Flo, and countless others. So forgive me for listening to this. If you worked with me back then and I didn't mention your name, I still remember many, many others that really impacted my life as well. But this is the one indelible experience, not the one, I had many indelible experiences, but the experience that impacted me the most, that's the better way of saying it, is that from working with that company, when I went back to visit that company years later, a medical assistant came up to me who was still working there and told me that, thanked me, first of all. She said, "Thank you for changing my life." And she said, I will never forget you. And that really made a huge impact upon me, because I was shocked that, remember, I went into this job straight out of school. So I was working as a 20-year-old with doctors, medical assistants, 10, 20, 30 years older than me. And it was shocking to me as a 20-year-old that I impacted someone's life and made it better, that they remember me even years later and wanted to come up and tell me this. And that meant so, so much to me, because I never thought as a 20-year-old that I could have that impact, even when I was doing it. So here are two very important lessons that I took away from that experience. I believed that a 20-year-old can never change the lives of people much older than himself or herself, because I was never taught about this potential in school. This is a concept that should be taught to children from the very first day of kindergarten, and then reinforced daily until the day they graduate from high school and university, but it never is. And secondly, I learned that's just by pursuing truth, because I was pursuing my truth then. I wanted to really help people. So I sought out a job in which I felt I could positively impact people's lives. So if you pursue truth, even without realizing it, you are always going to positively impact those people whom you encounter, and even change some of their lives without even realizing it. Because another question people have asked me is, how do I make a positive impact in this world? And that's the answer. Pursue your truth. I'm not going to repeat that cliche that if you're not waking up excited and jumping out of bed every day about what you're doing, then you're not pursuing your truth, because to me that's empty calorie talk. Everyone has ups and downs and has periods where you wake up and you're not excited even about doing something you love, and you just got to grind it out. Everyone has days like this. You can't wake up just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and extremely excited every day about what you're doing, even if you're doing what you love. So there are days that discipline is what would get you through. And that's why I said I think everyone should take martial arts, boys or girls, because the most important lesson I've learned is discipline. I went to train many times when I was sick, when I was tired after a long day of work, but it was that discipline of going that really I've kept with me through all my pursuits in life. And if you pursue truth, something you truly believe in, then this pursuit alone will make a positive impact upon those you encounter. So I will end this podcast by giving a shout out to Astrid, who's someone I just met a few days ago, and I believe she'll do something really positive in her life and will impact other people positively. And the reason I say this is because, I don't know, in the limited conversation I had with her, I felt she was one of the most present people I've met this past year, which is something I really can't articulate intelligently and verbally communicate intelligently. But when I meet someone who's truly present, I believe being present is the key to being happy, and it's the antithesis of a selfie-obsessed social media narcissist. And it really provides hope and makes me feel positive about the world again. So I just wanted to give a shout out to her. And remember, if you'd like to contribute to helping me produce more podcasts like this and want to become a patron of mine, please visit www.patreon.com/skwealthacademy. you can find the link to that, how to become a patron of mine, in the YouTube video description. So if you're not listening to this on YouTube, just go to YouTube, click the video description, you'll see. And I also place all the links there as far as how you can find my future podcasts on iTunes, blueberry.com, and Spotify, because this very likely is going to be the last podcast I post on YouTube. Although if you keep listening to my podcast on the other forums, then you'll find out where I'm going to migrate to, because I'm waiting for other video sites, maybe mine.com, I'm not sure. Kim.com is trying to start a new competitor to YouTube that I say is not going to censor free thinkers and people who want to help promote the truth, to destroy the computer simulation in which we live in. So I would be forever grateful. I think Kim.com said he's going to try to launch that before this year. He's someone too that's heavily persecuted, and I believe he has hundreds of millions of dollars. So I really respect someone like Kim.com, because he could just fall in line like a good little obedient soldier to the wishes of those in power and not try to challenge them and live his life in extreme comfort for the rest of our lives. But because he's challenging them, he's faced an enormous amount of clapback from those in power. And he's like Austrian that's living in New Zealand, and he's trying to provide platforms for people like me to spread truth and to continue our pursuit of truth and our business endeavors and be able to monetize our social media in the future, versus me being completely demonetized and not being able to earn a penny anymore from my social media contributions. And so that's why I thank anyone that becomes a patron. I'm forever grateful to you as well. But I really have a lot of admiration for Kim.com, because he's making life more difficult for himself and placing these obstacles in his life when he doesn't need to, because he is set for life with the amount of money he has. But he's still trying to pursue his own truth. And I truly want to voice my admiration for people like him. So before I go, I'm going to make one last appeal to community. That's all of you who made it this far. First of all, thanks so much for listening to the very end. I hope you really got a lot out of this podcast. Again, don't forget to ask your questions below in the comments below. If you're not listening to this on YouTube, you have a question you want me to answer or address in a future podcast, please do write it in your question in the comment below. And also, please remember to look at the links in the video description above or below in the YouTube video, and to send the links as far as how to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, on blueberry.com, on Spotify, to your friends, and to please make them aware of this podcast. If you find this super interesting, you find it super dull, of course, don't send it on to your friends. But if you find it super interesting, please do send it to all your friends. Let them know, because this, again, is the way we can win this battle of censorship, is just by building our community and by helping each other build a bigger, stronger, like-minded community. So thanks so much. And as always, remember, stay grateful, continue to feel blessed, and always remember, stay intensely curious. Until next time, so long.